I'm ASHLEE MARIE, and today I'm going to make this hand-painted watercolor double-barrel silver-leafed cake. Let's get started. My cakes are all baked and then frozen and now out of the freezer. Now we're going to level them all. And I just leave on the plastic to do this part because the knife just cuts right through the plastic, so that's not a problem. So hold your knife in place and let the turntable do the work for you. Once you get around once and it's met up, you should have a nice straight line. Now, if you are using a box cake mix, I would leave the plastic on top because box mixes tend to get really tacky and sticky, especially when they're frozen and then thawed. And so that'll keep your hand clean. And then just keep going around, letting the turntable and the knife just do the work for you. Nice and level. And there we go. I like to level both sides so when you cut into the cake, you're not seeing, that darker edge on the inside. And repeat. Now it's time to frost and stack our cakes. So I'm using white chocolate ganache, so I'm gonna put a little bit right on the base of the cake plate. And then we're gonna start stacking our cake. Make sure it's centered because you're not gonna wanna try to center it later. Put some of this white chocolate ganache on your cake. Now, white chocolate ganache is a little bit trickier than regular chocolate ganache in that most white chocolate isn't really chocolate. So you want to, one, make sure that you use really high quality chocolate, and two, instead of the normal 2-to-1 ratio that I recommend for ganache for frosting, I use a 3-to-1 ratio. Now, I'm making a double barrel cake today, meaning this is one full cake, and we're gonna put another full cake right on top of it that's the exact same size. So it'll be double the height, double barrel. Now, if I just stacked the next 3 layers right on top of this, it would actually collapse under all that weight. So we need to build an internal structure. So I have some dowel rods. You can also use straws, and not going into the center because we're gonna have a dowel that does that later. But over here on the outside, we're gonna put one of these dowels all the way through. Mark where it's at the top of the cake. Pull it back out. And then taking some cutters that I only use for cake, we're gonna find that line that we just made and we're gonna cut it. And I tend to cut away from the cake so it doesn't accidentally get in there. Make a couple more that are the same height as that first one. So line them up, use it as a guide. So after they're cut, you should have 4 dowel rods, all the same size. We're gonna put the first one back in, second one across the way, and then on the other ends. And then that way we know that it's perfectly level, even if my frosting's not perfectly level. Now take your cake plate and put it right in the middle. Now I used a cake plate that's slightly smaller than the cake itself. That gives me some room, but now I have this little lip right here. And so I'm actually gonna add some frosting to make up the difference there. And put that next cake layer on top and then just keep going. And thus our double barrel cake. So now we're gonna cover the sides. Now it's time to cover our cakes with fondant or fondant, however you want to say that. So this is my top tier that I've covered with some chocolate ganache, and I've rolled out some fondant already. As you can see, it's just under 1/4 of an inch thick. I prefer to roll out my fondant on the thicker side. I feel like it's easier to put it into place and get it nice and smooth when it's thicker to begin with. Just keep turning and working, turning and working, and turning and working. Now, because our fondant is on the thicker side, it actually becomes easier to push it back into itself, and that helps get rid of ripples and wrinkles. And once you have it more or less in place, we can take our fondant smoothers and work that around. I always have 2, because one you can hold the top of the cake with without getting handprints while you work the other one. So we're gonna take our knife and put it right under our cake board and cut around. Now, this first time, we just kind of cut fairly loosely. We're not trying to make it perfect this time. Just trying to get all that extra fondant off. Right now, if you want really sharp corners, what you want to do is flip your cake upside down, actually, and then you can work your fondant smoothers along the side and help push that fondant with gravity and push it down into the top, and that will give you nice sharp corners. Once you're happy with that, when it's upside down like this is a great time to even and smooth that fondant. For this top tier, we're gonna add some silver leafing. Now I have an entire video all on how I do the gold and silver leafing with a ton of tips and tricks. So I'm not gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna go ahead and move forward and get to the watercoloring. Watercoloring on fondant is similar to regular watercoloring, except that fondant isn't porous the way paper is. So while paper soaks up that water and helps create the effect, fondant doesn't. And so in order to make fondant porous, we're going to use clear alcohol instead of water. Water just gets slimy on fondant and slips off, and it's not going to give you the same effect as if you're using that alcohol that will help eat away the fondant and help it soak in, giving it a more similar to effect to watercolor. But personal preference. You can use clear vanilla that has a high alcohol content. You can use almond extract that has a high alcohol content. Obviously regular vanilla also has a high alcohol content, but because it has the color in it, it's not going to work as well. And then of course vodka is a great option as well. They all have about the same alcohol content in them, so they're all great ways to go. Remember, the alcohol is going to evaporate off, and what you're left with will just be the pigment from the color after it evaporates. You can just do brush strokes, right? If you add more alcohol to it, it will get lighter or eat away the color. If you go with more gel, you'll get a stronger shade. And if you get too much on and you're not happy with it, just take your paper towel and you can either dab up a whole bunch like that, or you can just wipe away a little bit. All right, so what you want to do is roll out some fondant, and we're going to use this as practice. Now, I prefer to let the fondant dry a little bit when I'm watercoloring on it. A fresh fondant doesn't take to the watercoloring quite as well as slightly dried fondant. So first I covered my cake with fondant, and now I'm letting it rest on the side. And then when I was done with that, I rolled out some extra fondant, and then I'm using that as my practice. So I in no way profess to be an amazing watercolor artist. If anything, I'm just kind of winging it. It's really more about the look that you want. So the more alcohol that you add, the thinner and lighter it will be. The more you get closer to the gel, the stronger your pigment will be. I like to add a little bit of that stronger color on the outside of each of my petals to give it a little bit more definition. But this is when it really just comes down to you. You don't even have to make flowers. You can just watercolor blurs all over your fondant. I've done that in many cakes as well. So, but make sure that you practice to know what look that you're trying to achieve before you start on your final cake. So once you feel confident and you're practicing, it is time to start putting it on the real cake. Wish me luck. So the difference between working on your practice sheet and working on the real cake, other than the fact that of course one is a final product and one can be redone over and over again, is that you're working on the side of the cake usually. And here, if I added too much liquid to my brush, I would actually cause a lot of drips on my cake, and there's not a lot you can do about it. So make sure when you're doing your practice runs that you remember not to go too wet, or that will cause problems when you then try to do that same technique on the side of the cake. Little by little by little. It's pretty much everything that I do in cake decorating. Add a little bit, see if you like it, add a little bit more, see if you like it, and then keep going from there. Don't try to do all of it at once. Don't try to rush it. Start on the back of the cake so that if you mess up your first flower or two, it won't be quite as big of a deal, and work your way towards the front so that you feel super confident by the time you get to the part of the cake that everyone is going to see the most of. The great part about this watercoloring technique is that you can just keep layering. If you get it too dark, get some more vodka or alcohol on your brush and wipe some off. Or right here, I'm using a dry brush and I'm wiping some off. If it's too light, get a little bit more color and add a little bit more. You can really create layers with this. I will recommend not going too much though. It's really easy to get caught up in trying to make it perfect. And when you try to make it perfect, for me personally at least, I find that I end up causing more problems than just stopping when I hit a really good point. And then make sure to add your leaves. I layer a couple different shades of green onto mine. And then make your next flower and keep going around until you're happy. You can go with a lot more flowers, a lot less flowers. And of course, you don't have to do flowers at all. Again, you can just use this watercoloring technique to make a mishmash of colors, which I have done on cakes before, and I really enjoy the effect of. So now this is finished and we are ready to add our top tier. So just like we did on the lower tier, we want to make sure that we give this some strength that will hold the next tier up. So again, avoiding the center because we're going to use that in just a second. We're going to go off to the side. Push this until we hit that cardboard, mark it, pull it out, and cut it. Now we're gonna take one really long one that's gonna go all the way through this cake, and we'll go through our next one. Put it straight down the center. When you hit that cardboard circle, you're gonna have to push a little bit harder. That should go just right through it. You just kind of knock it a little bit. There we go. I will often pre-cut that hole so that I don't have to do that, but sometimes I forget. All right. So there we go. Obviously this cake definitely has a back. Double barrels are a little bit hard, so I actually wrapped the fondant around it. So we're just gonna pretend that that's not there. We'll leave that right there like that. It's all finished. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and try some of the techniques, the double barreling, the watercoloring, the silver leafing. All together, it just makes a beautiful cake, and it's really not that hard. In the comments down below, don't forget to let me know if there's a special cake or technique that you want to learn and you want to see. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything. And thank you so much for watching.